Are you looking for an interesting new mechanic to bring to your playgroup? Well, today we're going to go over just that with the art of banding. Let's get into it. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for dropping by. And as always, before we jump right into today's deck tech, links to the deck list will be provided down in the description below, as well as timestamps throughout the video. So without further ado, let's jump right into today's commander. Making its debut in June of 1995, General Jarkeld came out in the expansion set known as Ice Age. He is a human soldier, a 1/2 body that reads: tap General Jarkeld and choose 2 target blocked attacking creatures. If each of those creatures could be blocked by all creatures that the other is blocked by, each creature that's blocking exactly one of those attacking creatures stops blocking it and is blocking the other attacking creature. Activate only during the declare blockers step. In other words, it's an old card with a very obscure ability that no one really understands. And to abuse this, we will use the mechanic known as banding. What the fuck is this shit? Get this shit off me! So what exactly is banding? To explain it in simple terms, banding is a now discontinued keyword in the game of Magic the Gathering that allows any number of creatures with the keyword bans or banding and one without to form a cohesive attacking unit. Think of it as the power of friendship. And you're probably wondering, why would you ever want to band creatures together when you can just attack as normal? Well, let me explain. Let's say we have 2 creatures with banding. Let's say, for instance, they're just 2/2s, to make it simple. And we're up against an opponent with a single 2/2. Well, without banding, attacks would go as follows. You declare attackers with your 2 creatures. Your opponent wants to trade one of them, so he'll put up a blocker and he'll kill off one of your 2/2s with the other one making it through, dealing 2 damage to your opponent. Well, if you declare a single band of attackers, if your opponent decides not to block, you're getting 4 damage through anyways. But let's say they do decide to block your entire band of creatures because they're blocking one of the creatures in your band. What's special about banding here is that you are allowed to assign and choose how the combat damage is divided. So rather than one of your 2/2s dying from their 2/2, you can split the damage evenly so each of your creatures are dealt 1 damage, so you don't take any losses while all the damage is pointed at their 1 creature. Now, banding gets a little bit more complex, especially when it comes to blocking, since it works different from the attack triggers. Let's say we have, once again, a creature coming at us to attack, and we want to block with X amount of creatures. As long as one of those creatures that we are blocking with has the keyword bans or banding, we are able to divvy up the combat damage however we would like throughout the creatures, all blocking the same creature that banding creature is blocking. Now, the reason I thoroughly enjoy banding for this deck is it allows for really fun shenanigans, allowing you to take down bigger creatures while attacking, as well as stopping those big baddies from coming at you, even if it's a simple 1/1. For further explanation on how banding works, I'll be linking a full-length video from an official Magic the Gathering judge who can explain it in greater detail. And before we get too far in today's deck tech, we must ask ourselves the age-old question: is this a deck for us? You'll thoroughly enjoy this deck if you enjoy playing with a unique commander with age-old cards. That's right, the entire deck list, aside from a few retro frames, is comprised entirely of old bordered cards. So it is a weaker and slower deck, but it is a very unique experience that is an absolute blast to play. Not to mention, this is a power 5 or 6 level deck aimed to compete against the precons Wizards of the Coast produces. So if you're not a fan of those, you can whip this deck out and still have loads of fun without having any worry of being too strong for those newer players at your table. However, every deck does have its downsides or shortcomings, so you're gonna dislike this deck if you want to play a strong commander, something with newer cards, as well as a deck that you don't have to explain whenever someone new sits down at your pod. Other than that, though, it is a great experience, and if this sounds something of interest to you, I highly recommend staying tuned for the rest of the video. We have a very exciting deck tech coming your way right now. Now, obviously, banding is quite the confusing mechanic, especially for those that aren't familiar with it. So why not capitalize on this with our commander, General Jarkeld? We can use it on our own attacking creatures, or even our opponents if we want to politic, or just cause confusion. So I guess you could say the goal or primary objective of this deck is for us ourselves to become the ultimate strategist using our General Jarkeld or our banders to ensure every single combat, whether it is us or our opponents, goes exactly as planned, and we control how combat damage is dealt on the board. It makes for some really interesting gameplay as it prevents our opponents from planning out their attacks properly, as we can redistribute the damage however we like, or even decide which creatures are blocking one another. So speaking of creatures, we've got 30 of them in the deck, and essentially what we did here was we added all the creatures with the keywords banned or banding to this deck, so we won't need to go over any of them simply because we're just adding redundancy and they all do the same thing. Some have better mana costs than the others, but the idea was to make it as consistent as possible. We want as many creatures with the keyword as possible so we can form a larger attacking group. So for this segment of the video, we're going to be covering the creatures that don't have banding that will be want banded in our banding attackers. Remember, in the beginning of the video, we mentioned a banded group of attackers can bring one creature without banding in their group. And what's nice about banding is you can have multiple bands per attack step. So starting things off, we have a 1/1 soldier for 1 white mana known as Deathblade Elite. So if we have this guy in a band of attackers with a bunch of valuable creatures that we don't want to die, we attack, and let's say they block, all we have to do is take 2 mana into the Deathblade Elite, and it says prevent all combat damage to be dealt to and dealt by Deathblade Elite this turn. And since banding will allow us to assign the combat damage how we want, if they try killing any of our creatures, we just redirect it right onto the Deathblade Elite, which can't take any damage, so we get off scot-free. For further redundancy, we have Cho-Minnow Revolutionary for 2 colors and 2 white, which does the exact same thing, although this time in the form of a static ability. And what's great about both of these creatures is it allows us to not take any losses if they're banded in a larger attacking group. So it really lets us swing freely here without any consequence. The next creature on our list is an Urza's Engine, a 1/5 artifact creature for 5 colorless mana that reads trample and pay 3 colorless mana to give it banding until end of turn, or pay 3 colorless mana for all creatures banded with Urza's Engine to gain trample until end of turn. We don't care about giving this thing trample ourselves, simply because if we have it in a band of attackers, we're good. All we need to do is pay the 3 mana for the second option, giving an entire band trample, and this hits especially hard if we pair it with a mirror entity and just dump our remaining mana into that large group of banded creatures that now have trample, making their base stats much larger than they actually are. And last but not least, we have the final creature on our list that we would like to include in a band of attackers without the keyword, and that is none other than Abu Jafar. For 1 white mana, we've got a pre-Death Touch creature, almost like the father of Death Touch here, but even better. He reads with a errated text that says, when Abu Jafar dies, destroy all creatures blocking or blocked by it. They can't be regenerated. The idea with this is to put Abu Jafar in one of 2 groups. You can either put it in a group that you want to make it where it gets in hits, so your opponents are too scared to block because you'll just redirect to Abu Jafar and kill the creatures, or B, you put it in a group large enough that scares the opponent into forcing blocks. Let's say all your creatures have trample thanks to Urza's Engine, or buffs thanks to the mirror entity. Let's say you have a massive group, so they have to full block with their team. You just redirect all that damage to Abu Jafar, and when he goes to the graveyard and your stuff remains untouched, you'll board wipe whatever decided to block that band.
No. Wait.
Now, of course, Mirror Entity isn't the only way to buff up these creatures, so we've got quite a few Anthem effects to use in our arsenal. Starting off, we have Angelic Voices, Glorious Anthem, Call to Arms, Divine Sacraments, Shared Triumph, Vanquisher's Banner, and Coat of Arms. For both Coat of Arms and Vanquisher's Banner, you're going to get the most bang for your buck if you name the keyword human. Paired with cards such as Reveille Squad, Sarah's Blessing, Knighthood, and Reconnaissance, it won't be long before our army quickly takes shape into a point of critical mass. Not to mention, our deck, it consists of extremely small creatures, so we can pair it with board wipes that won't really affect us as long as we don't have a lot of Anthem effects on board. We've got cards such as Retribution of the Meek. It says bury all creatures power 4 or greater, and another effect very similar with Elspeth Sun's Champion, a 6-mana planeswalker that provides us 3 soldiers each turn when we uptick her, a board wipe when we tick her down by 3, or if we get our ultimate off, we get an Anthem effect and flying for all of our creatures. Absolutely phenomenal, especially in a deck with 30 creatures. But as always, none of this means a damn thing if we can't draw cards and look to build our board state. Which we've got cards like Maze Mime Tone to dig deeper in our deck if we are unsure about the card on top. Grafted Skullcap after we play all of our low CMC creatures, Howling Mind for card draw, Mind's Eye, Memory Jar, which is our answer to a Windfall in mono white. Really cool card here. Scroll Rack, obviously if you pair this with a land tax, it is devastating, and even a Slate of Ancestry. Slate of Ancestry is amazing, especially with Elspeth on the table, because you pay 4, you discard your hand, you draw cards equal to the number of creatures on board. Pretty good deal, especially if you have a larger board states. An honorable mention in here, we do have a Sentinel Flute. It's a 5-mana artifact, so it is quite pricey. But once we have it on board, we can usually just pay 1 for X and get any one of our banders, just so we have more banders as our blockers or attackers. And once again, paired with the Anthem effects on board, even if we're paying 1 mana for a 0/1 creature, if we have enough Anthem effects, it won't matter. That creature will be big enough for some really good value. So after all of this, you're probably wondering, how does the deck win? Especially since we've only displayed Anthem effects and some creatures thus far. Well, being at a pre-con power level, the deck can win in one of 3 ways. Obviously, going wide and beating face is one of them, and it's not too hard to imagine given the power level and the amount of creatures we have in our arsenal. This will typically be done through outwitting our opponents with the strategy of banding as well as making use of our commander. The second way we can win is Aikido-based effects. Cards like Harsh Justice for 2 colorless and 1 white. This instant speed spell reads with erotic text. Cast this spell only during the declare attacker step and only if you've been attacked this step. This turn, whenever an attacking creature deals combat damage to you, it deals that much damage to its controller. Unfortunately, however, this card is not a replacement effect. So, if you are not able to tank the damage, since the trigger is delayed, you will end up losing the game if you cannot soak up enough damage and live. So the key here is having plenty of life to take a massive swing and redirecting all of that damage to your opponents. To gain life in the deck, we do have the Michael Jackson of Magic cards known as Reverse Damage. For 2 white and 1 colorless, this instant speed spell reads, the next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. You gain life equal to the damage prevented this way. Now, of course, this too has its limitations, simply because it's only affecting 1 source of damage. So make sure you choose wisely. It is best used if it's targeted on a creature that has plenty of power to gain you lots of life. But if those effects are not enough to outright win you the game, we do have the creme de la creme of our instant speed Aikido effects, known as Eye for an Eye. For 2 white mana, this instant speed spell reads, the next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, instead, that source deals that much damage to you, and Eye for an Eye deals that much damage to that source's controller. This is by far the superior option to Harsh Justice, simply because it is a cheaper spell and it is a replacement effect. And what I mean by replacement effect is you are able to tank a hit big enough for you to lose the game, and because you played Eye for an Eye, at the same time it'll deal that much damage to your opponent. So there's no delayed triggers, so you can essentially either win the game or force it into a draw. It's a really cool card. Love the art.
Oh, this is not how this was supposed to go.
And finally, the last method in which this deck can pull out a win is once we swing with our various banders. Let's say we've taken a few players out, or there's not many people left remaining in the game. We will take all of our banders in our army and go on an expedition for a certain artifact, with that artifact being Sword of the Ages. For 6 colorless mana, this artifact reads: Sword of the Ages enters the battlefield tapped. Tap and sacrifice Sword of the Ages and any number of creatures you control. Sword of Ages deals X damage to any target where X is the total power of the creatures sacrificed this way. Then exile Sword of the Ages and those creature cards. So it's a really awesome card. Essentially, you're going to want to swing out into an opponent, kill them, and then on your end step, all you have to do is exile all of your creatures with the sword and just directly damage someone through the power of friendship to hopefully win you the game. This card sees the best results once again, just as swinging out with a mirror entity with quite a bit of mana pumped into that X, making all of your super small creatures fast and plentiful. But yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it for the deck tech. All of the creatures that I didn't showcase simply just have banding, so it'd be very redundant if I were to showcase all of those creatures, especially cards like Ication Phalanx. It's a 5 mana 2/4 and its only ability is banding. So there's really not much to talk about there. If you'd like to see the full deck list, it'll be provided down in the description below for my Moxfield link. And the play style of this deck, once again, is pretty self-explanatory. You just shit out creatures, you outwit your opponents through banding, and your commander swapping blockers, confuse them. If they hit you, you try to use your Aikido effects. You beat them down, maybe you sacrifice your creatures to the Sword of Ages, and you try to pull out a win through your janky memes of strategy. As we wrap up this video, once more, we are now on Patreon, so if you like early access to content, potential shoutouts, or just general support of the channel and help shape it and what is going to be coming in the future, make sure to check out my Patreon down in the description below. We've got a tier and something for everybody there. And as always, if you'd like to stay tuned for future videos here on the channel, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell down in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Something said, my name is Patrick, host of EDH Brutality. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out, guys.